So as I mentioned earlier, Wei couldn't make it because of red tape with visa application, and I and George will cover some of the content. So very briefly, wanted to cover the release process because that has changed, and then George will give the 4.7 and 4.8 development update section. So since Xen 4.7, we've actually changed the way how we make releases, right? So notable changes are we reduced this release cycle to 6 months and release on a fixed date every year. And that means roughly in terms of guidance, we do 4 months of development and 4 months of freeze. But to actually make sure that we don't have 4 months of dead time, we're trying to branch earlier during each release cycle as well. And the theory is that if there's less churn, then there's less risk, so we can branch earlier. So 4.7 was sort of an interim release because it was longer, because we're just starting to get to this shorter release cycle. So how does this really look like, right? So basically, we would fundamentally release in December, and we would release in June, and then we have 4 months of development. Then we're clearing the test gate, and then we have freeze. But actually, what we really want to do is, maybe a month into the freeze, is start creating the branch such that we can open master and get stuff back in. In detail, this looks then like this, right? So we have. This is kind of the status we're in right now. We have the 4.7 release branch already. That was created a few months ago. Development is happening on master. And we're approaching the state which we're calling the last post state. So fundamentally, that was a concept which Wei introduced. The basic idea behind it is that a patch series to be considered for the release has to be posted, I think 2 or 3 weeks, before the actual final free state.
I think it was 2 weeks.
It's about 2 weeks, yeah. I don't know, but presumably, so it depends on the size, right? So I guess if you submit a 40, size patch series which has never been looked at 2 weeks before the freeze point, it probably won't go in. So there's a little bit of a trade-off we have to look at. Then we have the freeze point. At that point, no new series can go in. And then, we wait for the push gate to clear, and then we're going to start making RCs, typically 1 every other week. And at some point, halfway through the release branch, through the freeze period, we create a new branch based on a risk assessment, and when it's ready, we release. And this is basically just, the same information encoded in a slightly different way. There are a few notable changes. So we used to have freeze exceptions. But that created a lot of discussion and pain for everyone involved. So we basically abolished freeze exceptions. If you don't make the date, it doesn't go in. And that removes the need to argue. Halfway during the release candidate period, we're obviously during that RC period, we're going to have to tighten what we allow in. So, the riskier, the longer in the cycle, the further down in the cycle we are, the less risky changes we allow in. And towards the end, we only allow blockers in. And that's basically the maintainers and release managers' responsibility to make those decisions. The other thing is I wanted to actually explain to you how the tracking process works, because there are quite a few new people in here. And for you guys, for your features to be tracked, you need to follow that process. So the release manager, in our case Wei, every month he will send out a development update. email on Xendevel, and he will basically say, these are the timelines, these are the dates, what are you working on? What are the major features you're working on? He will make some assumptions about stuff he knows about. So you should go onto that email and check whether what you're working on is on that list, and if it's not on a list, you ought to reply and let us know, and then Wei will start tracking that. And then we basically just continue this process the next time around. If you are on this list and you reply, well, actually, I'm almost done with this, or maybe it's not going to make it for this release, or maybe I'm not going to have time to work on this, or I'm starting to work on something else. And that way, we're basically getting a very accurate picture of who's working on what. And that really helps everyone to understand what is going on. And when we then get close, when we then start to make the RCs, those emails become RC emails, and basically the focus shifts from features to bug fixes. But it's fundamentally that same iterative process. Release manager prompts you, you reply, and then we just collate all that information. We do group features into groups of different categories. So there's the Xen code base itself. So there we look at the hypervisor, at the Toolstack, and other upcoming things. And then we also typically track test lab related stuff. And we're also tracking major upstream dependencies, such as like Linux, major Linux changes, or BSD changes, or changes in mini OS, or other stuff we depend upon. So let's talk a little bit about Xen 4.7. So Xen 4.7 was the first of our fixed term release cycle, but it wasn't a 6 months release, it was actually 9 months. So we started on the 9th of September, and we branched, before that we branched actually a month earlier, and a freeze date was 8th of April, and a release date was the 20th of June. That actually slipped by a little bit, because during the time we were going to release, we had a couple of vulnerabilities, and a release manager basically made a call to say, well, we shouldn't really release and then just force everyone 2 weeks later to apply a couple of security vulnerabilities. So in those cases, it actually made sense to slip the release a little bit. We also wanted to include live patching. But we've still done quite well in terms of historical record. We've had past releases where we were months late, and this is one where we were 2 weeks late. And now I wanted to hand over to George. Do you want to grab this, or should I just hand the...
Yeah, so just going to go through briefly. So there's a lot of features that we've identified. Just going to go through, call out some of the key ones. So the ones with the little dots after them are, there's actually talks about that feature at the summit today. So if you want to learn more about it in depth, then look at the schedule and go see the talk. So some of the cool things we have, so can config support. So Doug Cardo added that in so that it's a lot easier now to turn off bits of the hypervisor that you don't want. We have 2 companies now that are doing a lot of stuff related to virtual machine introspection, and the result of that is that the mem sharing and mem access code has improved quite a bit. We're working towards trying to get credit 2 to be the default scheduler, and there's been a lot of work on that recently. There's still a bit more to go. We have the Meng Shu has been working on the improvements for the real-time scheduler. So this is kind of moving forward and becoming more useful. One of the big things that came in is we had some guys on the Zen server team, in particular Malcolm, did some work with per CPU reader-writer locks for a lot of the things, which greatly improved the performance on really large systems. Obviously, Hypervisor Live patching so that you can apply fixes to your hypervisor without shutting it down. A whole slew of hardware enablement functionalities, so memory protection keys, Xsave, TC scaling. But the posted interrupts should allow devices which are passed through to happen a lot faster, because what it allows to happen is that when the device generates an interrupt, if posted interrupts are enabled properly, then the hardware will deliver the interrupt directly to the guest, instead of having to deliver it to Zen and then Zen delivers to the guest. So for particularly, I think, network throughput, this should be pretty good. ARM, so I don't actually know. A lot of these seem to be mainly kind of just filling things out, right? So the ARM has kind of arrived as far as major features, and so we're just kind of making it more robust, more well-rounded. Is that an accurate? Yeah. So still a lot of stuff. Growing and improving, but it's mainly just kind of filling out the corners at this point. Toolstack, we've got a lot of good stuff. So PV USB support, contributed by Zusa. This hot plugging of QEMU-based disks. So it used to be the case that for PV guests, we had this. You could write a block script that would allow you to basically define your own kind of storage backend. So you could use this for iSCSI, you could use this for RBD. There's no reason you couldn't do this for Ceph or any number of other things like that. But it didn't work with HVM guests. So we made that work with HVM guests. Soft reset support doesn't sound, so it allows a PV guest to make a reset call, but still have to boot into a new kernel as though it's rebooting, but not overwrite its own memory. Now, why would you want to do that is because you want to have a crash kernel, right? So if you have a kernel that's running and it crashes, you reboot into a special crash kernel that can give you a lot more information from the dumps. So that was contributed by Red Hat, right? Am I right about that? Okay. libzen control broken into a set of stable libraries. That's just a maintenance kind of a feature. The Colo stuff that the Fujitsu guys have been working on, the Zen part of that has been upstreamed. And I think, did you want to say anything about this? So.
There's a few stats, you know.
Right, so this was not in the slide things that I got, so I don't have anything to say about this. I'll think about it for a bit and then move on. As we said, so Zen 4.8 is going to be the first fixed release, which is going to be short. And so the dates for these, when we're aiming for releases, was designed to avoid the major cultural holidays of Christmas in the West and Chinese New Year in the East. So that's why the first one was 9 months, even though it was a fixed period. So I think the key thing about this is that once we all come back from the summit, the last date to post your first series that can be accepted is in 2 weeks, so mid-September. And the last date that something can be checked in is October, is the 1st of October. So if you have your secret thing that's almost ready, but you haven't sent the first series out, then do that soon. Yes, okay, so here's this. We have a lot of stuff, so this is 4.8 plus because we can't 100% predict when we're going to finish stuff. But we have a lot of stuff that people are working on in the works. So the PVH2 is moving along swiftly. So the DOMU stuff is mostly nailed down. Some of the guys at Oracle are working on doing a ACPI for the DOMU. And some of the Citrix guys are working on stuff for DOM0. I don't have an assessment. I think basically for the DOM0 stuff, I'll not, it might make it, might not make it. I think, can anyone contradict me on that?
Doctor said he was planning to make it for it.
Yeah, so it would be nice, but I think given that there's only a month basically to get everything in, there's a risk it might not make it, and that's just what's going to happen. Now, what about the, Conrad, can you say anything about the status of the DOMU side, the Boris's ACPI patches?
One hash that's relicensing one file, GPL2. The Toolstack user tracking down all the contract stats.
Right.
That's
Okay, so but again, it's like maybe we'll get it done by by October, maybe not.
But I guess we could review it and then just confirm,
Yeah.
the licensing thing is just it's not a functionality thing. It's
I mean, the rest of it review.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so live patching for ARM, I've been told we have a working prototype for both ARM64 and ARM32. Is that right, Conrad? So that should definitely make it in. What's that? Hopefully. Yeah. So the loading arbitrary firmware blob from the Toolstack, this is, so at the moment, basically, for CBIOS, for our BIOS for HVM guests, we have to compile that into HVM loader, which means that you have to download and build CBIOS as you're building Zen. But there's a lot of distributions have packages that have a CBIOS binary in it already. So what this allows us to do is instead of having to, and if you want to change CBIOS, then you actually have to recompile your Zen package as well. So the idea behind this is that you can just use the existing CBIOS binary and pull that in at runtime rather than baking it at compile time. And that should make stuff for distributions quite a bit better. NVDIM support, people working on PV-SCSI support. Deprivileged QEMU is a really big thing that I think are important. I think at this point there's still a lot of design discussions that need to be sorted out about how to do that right. So I would be kind of pleasantly surprised if it made it in by October, but I'm not going to hold my breath. And a number of other things that are going on. So one of the big things that we just need to raise awareness of is the BlockTap 2. So BlockTap 2 is a disk support mechanism that basically the Zen in-tree version hasn't had any real love or maintenance for many years. Zen servers using a forked version that they call TapDisk 3, but that's not. There's no plans at the moment for upstreaming that into the Zen. So at this moment, we're basically we've been trying to sort out some solution for a while, and I think at this point we're just going to basically remove it. So if you have a burning desire to keep BlockTap 2 in tree, or to work on perhaps integrating Zen servers BlockTap 3 with the upstream project, then let me know and I can try and put you in the right direction. Otherwise, I guess don't say we didn't warn you. And other things that we're doing is the cleanup of making sure that the copying files accurately reflect the licenses of all the files in the directories. So nothing super major there, but it's something that's pretty important, particularly for large corporations, for legal departments to be able to figure out what their actual legal responsibilities and liabilities are. And Lars is working on that. So I think, do you want to take it on from here? Or?
Yeah, so yesterday at the advisory board meeting, we basically just approved buying a few servers. It's ARM64 machines for the test lab. So I will be putting in the order of some software machines, early next week. And I don't know how long it will take, but hopefully for the 480 cycle. Hopefully it will be 2 or 3 weeks before we can have those things installed. And I'm also ordering 2 gigabyte R150 T61s, which are basically Cadmium boxes. But I don't know how long it will take us to get those. And we already talked a little bit about OSS test. On the right, we see a couple of pictures of how these machines look like.
Oh, so I actually didn't look at this list, so if you see something on here you'd like to call out, then I guess if this is something that you worked on. Yeah, there's been a lot of work with the FreeBSD PV drivers, and I think there's been a lot of preparation for FreeBSD to be able to run in PVH mode. So FreeBSD was never ported to the original PV mode, but running in PVH mode should be pretty a lot easier. Okay, and as Laura said, if you see something that you are working on that is not on this list, then please look out for those release emails and let Wei know what's going on. And is that all? Okay. With that, I'll take any questions. Okay, well, I guess thanks.